Hey everybody, so right now we're going to take a look at another kind of a sentence, an interrogative sentence, in other words, a yes-no question. And we're going to see something different from the previous sentence. Here we're going to see an example of when we get I to C movement. That is, the element that's in I, in other words, the tense element, is going to move to a position to the left of the subject into the C position. So let's take a look at that right now. Okay, so the sentence that we have here is, did the children watch a movie? And this differs from the previous sentence that we saw because there we had simply a regular statement. Here we have an interrogative sentence, and we know it's an interrogative sentence in English because we see the did that appears to the left of the subject of the sentence. All right, so the first thing you should do is think about what this sentence would look like in its regular declarative form, and we end up with the children watched a movie. But as we saw in the previous video, we don't want to think of it exactly as that. We want to recognize the fact that the thing that we think of as being tense is actually separate from the verb phrase. So the children passed, watched a movie. And what's interesting about this is that this past word can actually be replaced by any of these other things, these other elements that go in I. For example, will, can, should. So we end up with the children will watch a movie, the children can watch a movie, the children should watch a movie, etc. All of these elements, whether they're tense markers or whether they're modals like could, should, and would, end up in I, or at least they start out in I. And we're going to see in a interrogative question that these will actually move out of the I position and move into the C position. So let's take a look and see what's going on here. We have a word like past, or an element like past, and it's going to move into the position to the left of the subject, which is exactly what we have here. Okay, so this is kind of what we end up with, is this kind of a movement, and this then gives us, did the children watch a movie? Because when the element that's a past marker is in C, it ends up being pronounced as did. So we end up with, did the children watch a movie? All right, so let's take a look and see how the tree is actually created for this sentence. I'm writing it out here as though it's actually pronounced. However, the one thing that you should notice is over here, in between children and watch, we end up with this little T, which stands for a trace. And what a trace is, it is the residue of the thing that actually moved. So in other words, when an element moves in a tree, it doesn't simply move, it actually creates an unpronounced copy of itself, and then it moves. This unpronounced copy is called a trace. Okay, and we need to represent it in the tree. So the very first thing that we're going to do, as before, is we're going to put in our categories. So there we go. And we can see that did, even though it started out in the I position, actually ends up in C. C is the landing site for the element that was in I in an interrogative sentence, in a question sentence. So again, the word that we have here, did, could also have been should, could, would, might, must, may, like that. Okay, anyway, as before, the is a determiner, children's a noun. Again, the did started out in the I position as a past tense marker. Watch is a verb, is a determiner, and movie again is a noun. So the first thing, as before, that we're going to do is we're going to create our noun phrases. Recall that a noun phrase is a D and an N. So we end up with our two noun phrases. And as before, we're going to start from the right and work our way toward the left. So we're going to combine now our verb plus a noun phrase, which is going to make a verb phrase. Same thing, we're going to combine the element that's in I with a verb phrase to create our I bar. And then we're going to merge in the subject, which is the children, that ends up going into the specifier of IP. In other words, NP and I bar form together to create an IP. All right, the tree is not complete now because we have one element, this did, that's kind of hanging out in space. We can't have that. We have to have every element in the sentence being attached to some other part of the tree. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to say that a C can combine with an IP to create a C bar. And just like an I bar over here has on top of it an IP, A C bar is going to have on top of it a CP. Now, the one thing that you're going to notice, because we're actually done with this tree, is that it seems like we have an empty space over here. So there's nothing in the specifier of CP. That's actually okay. The way we're dealing with it in this class, we're allowed to have parts of the tree which don't have an element that's filling it. Now, the opposite is not true. In other words, we cannot have an element that's not attached to something. However, we can have part of the tree that doesn't have anything filled in it. We're going to see in the next videos coming up that something actually can go in that space. It just is that it's not happening in this particular tree. So as far as we're concerned, this tree is completed. Did the children watch a movie? Okay, so the only thing left to do right now then is that we can draw the movement line from our trace to the C position where the past marker ended up. And while this is not required, it simply helps us visually to understand what's going on in the tree.